listening to The TD Show.
Touchdown Titans! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle! Tennessee has pulled a miracle!
Broadcast live on thetdshow.com.
There goes Davis! Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back! Auburn's going to win the football game! Auburn's going to win the football game!
2 hours of the best sports talk on the planet. Or at least out of Edmonton, Kentucky.
Batted off. Oh, God! Stokely down the sideline! Can he catch him? Stokely! Wow! Touchdown! Denver! Unbelievable!
Coming to you live, your hosts, TJ and Dan.
Here comes the
Welcome back to the TD Show. Today on the program we go 3 hours. That's right, 3 hours of Dan and I.
If we can make it.
Hopefully
our
we
voices
can make
hold out.
it. Busy day today. We'll be all over the place. We got college basketball, Daytona 500 recap, MLB, NBA, NFL, and some local sports.
Local sports.
Little local sports. We'll do a little district recap, and we'll also talk about the news regarding the Greenwood boys basketball coach that came out this week. I have a guarantee regarding the Cincinnati Reds upcoming season, and Daniel will provide you with a little WKU what to watch, and you can't forget 2 Minutes with Paula Dan, which will be coming up in the third hour of the show. He'll be giving you a little deer meat recipe.
Yeah, speaking of WKU, before we move on, they've been the most exciting team to watch in the state of Kentucky lately. Louisville's kind of had an off year, and Kentucky's had a rough couple weeks, but Western's still looking pretty good, so we'll get to that maybe in the second hour of the show. But don't forget, you can still reach us at Facebook at facebook.com/TheTDShow, and our Twitter handle is @TheTDShow. You can also email the show at mail@thetdshow.com. You can listen and watch us live at thetdshow.com on the live feed page. And you can still listen to us on Spreaker.com/user/TDShow or on the Spreaker app for your smartphones and tablets. If you're not able to watch or listen to us in our entirety today, you can listen or watch to the podcast at thetdshow.com podcast page or on Spreaker or on YouTube. Remember, we'll be looking for your comments and questions on our live feed page, Facebook, and Twitter. But what we really want you to do is give us a call this morning. Going to be going 3 hours, so got plenty of opportunity to get up. If you're a late sleeper, you can still get up and catch us. And number to call us is 502-509-3190. That's 502-509-3190. And share your thoughts with us. Don't forget to vote on our poll, which is located on the homepage on the right side there of the tdshow.com. And the poll question this morning: do you believe the NCAA should ban court storming?
And just a reminder that all guests and callers today will be brought to you by Hoover Auto Parts. Hoover Auto Parts are the most reliable auto parts in the industry and are sure to keep you on the road through extreme conditions. But talking about the poll question there, do you believe the NCAA should ban court storming? Let's just go ahead and start there and start with the story, at least this week, that has sparked the discussion. You had New Mexico State and Utah Valley playing the other night, and after the game, the fans stormed the field, and it started with two players kind of getting in each other's faces.
Yeah, Ross for New Mexico State, and then Utah Valley, the coach's son, and I can't remember his name.
Right. And the general consensus is, had the students not stormed the court, then coaches or other teammates would have been able to get in between those two players. They would have took them to the locker room, and that would have been the end of it. You wouldn't have had a real fight.
Yeah. What happened was Ross got the ball. There's like a second left, and they were down 6, and instead of attempting to make a shot, he threw the ball as hard as he could at the closest Utah Valley State player. It kind of ended in a hands thrown up talking match. There wasn't any kind of physical violence at that point. Still, I think Ross probably incited the whole incident. Then the fans rush the floor, and there's some punches thrown. Ross gets a 2-game suspension, and another player on the team gets a 1-game suspension.
And the Utah Valley team suspended their player, but it took the conference, I believe, to suspend the two New Mexico State players.
Well,
they didn't.
The Utah Valley team, the coach's son was involved. Coaches are always a little harder on their kids. And
you ever heard of Utah Valley before?
No,
me neither.
No.
Me neither.
But I think they handled it the correct way. Their fans, however, did not handle it. I watched the replay about 15 times last night just to try and pick out everything that was going on. Obviously, I think the Ross kid should have got a suspension because he kind of incited this. The other kid that threw a punch was getting his hind end handed to him by about 30 fans. I don't have a problem with defending yourself in that situation. He was mobbed.
Yeah, we talked rushing the court last week, but in the sense that we were talking about, we weren't really talking about banning it. We were just talking about whether we agreed whether certain programs should do it. Yeah,
where you should have a little more class than that.
Right.
Here's the thing. I understand fans get fired up, but there's a safety aspect that needs to be involved here. Now, I don't know of any instances where fans get hurt doing this. I think it's a matter of time before it does happen. But, I mean, if it had happened, I think it would have been big news and we'd have heard about it.
Right.
Here's the thing. While there are still players on the court, I think that if you rush the court, there has to be some kind of penalty to affect game outcomes. I don't care if it means come back and you get a technical and shoot the free throws. I don't know. There's got to be something to affect game outcomes. We see that they levy fines about every time this happens, and that doesn't slow anything down.
Yeah, I have a plan for it. It's not that drastic that it affects outcomes. Before I get to that, I'd just like to say, in regard to the players, if there's fans that come out on the court and you've just lost a game, a close game there at the end, like that one was, and you're down, and a fan gets in your face and is giving it to you, I think you should have the right to punch that guy in the face.
Oh, and especially in this situation, because maybe not if there's no physical contact, but these guys were rushed. They were mobbed. I thought they didn't have any other way to get out but to fight their way out.
Obviously, that's not going to be the popular answer. I mean, the student athlete should, do whatever to get out of there. And, you're taught as a player to ignore the fans in the stand. You pretend they're not there, but when they're on the court in your face, it's a little different.
Yeah, and most of the New Mexico State players were trying to get other players out. You saw people rush into the pile and pull their players out. There was one, if you ever go back and watch the replay, if you get a chance, there's a New Mexico State player laying on the ground, and another guy just jumps on top of him and covers him because he's getting kicked and pummeled. Right. In that situation, you've got to be able to at least get off the court. We've been in a situation sort of similar in a Glasgow game one time. Do you remember that when the bench cleared?
Yeah.
And we were on the floor, and I didn't know what to do. Yeah. But it was at home. That was at home
our junior year.
Yeah,
there was some questionable characters on that Glasgow team.
Yeah. I still hold a grudge. I don't even like Glasgow for that.
Now. We'll try to put that video up on the Twitter during the first break. Since this is the poll question, we'll be talking about it throughout the day. Let everybody be able to see that. But my plan, for rushing the court, because I do not think it should be banned. I would go something along the lines, say at the beginning of a season, a school picks out one home game, and says, but if you're an elite program, you don't even have to do it. But if you're not a Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, or Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, so on, you don't even have to do it. But say if you're a team like these two, at the beginning of the year, you pick one game on your schedule, one home game. And you tell your students, if we win this game, you can rush the floor. This is the one game where you can. And when you rush the floor, you wait till everybody's off, the other team's off the floor. If we win, and you tell that team before the game, if we win this game, we're going to rush the floor. So after the game, y'all get off in a quick process. And if you have any students rush the floor on any game before that, they're done. Can't come back.
Okay, don't come back to the games. I thought you meant they're going to be expelled.
No. You're done. No more tickets sold to you. You don't get in the game.
For life or while you're a student?
While you're a student. And also, if you come on the court, if we look at the video and you're on the court before that team's off the court during that one game where we're allowed to rush the court, same thing. You're done. You don't get to come back to any games.
It's going to be... I like most of it. What I think is going to be hard is to pick the games beforehand. You don't know. I mean, a lot of times this would be like comeback victories where you've been beaten by the team.
If you're evenly matched against the opponent, there's no real reason to. I mean, say you are. Let me think of an example.
If you're a favored team.
All right, let's say that you're Virginia Tech, and you have a home game against Duke and North Carolina, which are probably the only 2 games on your schedule where you should be completely berserk if you win.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture their schedule for this year, but yes.
Well, maybe Syracuse now.
I was going to say Syracuse.
Right. But you pick one of those 3 games. You pick one of those 3. That's it. If you win the other 2 and you lose the one where you get to rush the floor, so be it.
I think part of the problem with this is that I don't think schools necessarily condone floor rushing to begin with.
No, but I mean,
but they don't necessarily punish it as harsh.
It's going to happen, so you might as well put some sort of thing in place to control it.
You're right. I see what you're saying. What I think is there should just be a zero tolerance if there are fans if there are players still on the floor. Handshake has not happened yet. Officials are still out there. You don't rush the floor. If you want to rush the floor after the officials have walked off, which means the players have walked off because they're going to wait until the players walk off, then you want to rush the floor, you should be able to do it. But I think if you rush the floor any time, I don't care if you do it every game. I don't like it. Like I said, like we talked about last week, I don't think that it's the respectful thing to do or the classy thing to do. But if you're going to do it and you do it while fans are on the floor, I think there needs to be some penalty to the team as well as to the students.
But I don't if you're a school and you even condone court rushing, I don't think you want it done every game or it's going to lose its effectiveness and what it is.
That might be a good thing.
Well, maybe. But, I mean, my theory on it is you should still limit. There's no reason you should ever need to rush the floor more than one time a year.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you've lost 80 games in a row and maybe you win 3 the next season.
I think there has to be some way that the school steps in and at least calms the storm here. I could remember, of course, I keep going back to high school, but in this same instance where we played Glasgow and this fight broke out anyway, we ended up winning the ball game. I remember when the students were rushed on the court, there were school officials that went over there and held them back until the players had shook hands.
Right.
And I remember watching as Huffman, with his arms outstretched to about a 7-foot wingspan, is holding back this tide of students until the players clear, and then he lets them go.
Right.
I mean, there has to be some way.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of law enforcement at the games.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, if you're going to do it, I think that if you do it while players are on the court, whether you do it once a year, 3 times a year, needs to be some kind of penalty, not only to the school, but to the students. I don't know what that penalty is. I don't have the answers, or they'd put me in charge of the NCAA.
Well, you probably do just as well of a job as the president of the NCAA does.
Probably correct.
But this is the poll question. Do you believe court storming should be banned by the NCAA? What's the results of the poll question right now?
Let's see what we've got on the poll question this morning.
It looks like
75 no, 25 yes. So most people think you should not ban court storming.
Right. So
I voted yes.
Well, I voted no. But give us your thoughts this morning via Twitter or Facebook or via the comment box there below the live feed on our website. Or give us a call at 502-509-3190. I do not believe that we've had a female caller in the short history of this show.
Not that I'm aware of.
It'd be nice to get a female perspective if we could get our first female caller today. Maybe get a female caller in here. But staying with college basketball, we'll talk about the court storming issue throughout the day. But staying with college basketball, talking about this past week that has been, Kansas wins its 10th straight Big 12 title. Now, I did not know this until after the game. I saw Jay Billis tweet it out after the game. Only 5 teams in history have won 10 consecutive
regular season
right.
conference titles. Correct.
UCLA, UConn, UNLV, Gonzaga, and now Kansas. Even more impressive about this, Kansas has won 3 of those 10 without a single starter from the prior season.
And what I think is most impressive about this, if you look at Gonzaga and UCLA,
right,
the conferences that they were winning it in were a lot less hardy than the conference that Kansas.
UConn's is pretty impressive.
Pretty good, yeah. But UConn had that run there in the '90s, in the early 2000s, where they were pretty impressive.
Honestly, there's one team that I'm surprised isn't on this list though.
Who's that?
Kentucky.
Right, and they've won the most conference titles of any team.
But I would have figured at some point along the line they would have won 10 straight.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to put together a time when they would have done it, and I think if they had gotten close, it would have been in the 50s through the early 60s and the end of the beginning of Coach Hall era. But I think every time a new coach takes over at Kentucky, there's generally a little lag.
Yeah.
No matter how great they end up being, like Coach Hall and then the lag to, I mean, Coach Rupp and the lag to Coach Hall. There's a few dead years there in the middle. So and then you would think in the 80s to the early 90s, but then as Patino came in, he missed the tournament, went to the NIT his first year. So I can't put a 10 years plan together.
I know, but when you think of the top 4 teams, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, you would have thought Kansas and Kentucky would have probably done
right.
it.
Duke and North Carolina, because I bet together they've won 10 in a row.
Oh, yeah.
Together they've probably won 15 in a row.
Right, but when you're playing against each other every year, I mean, it's hard to do. To continue something that happened last Saturday after we went off there that night, Duke-Syracuse.
Yes.
Game just as good as the game in Syracuse.
Before, that's correct.
And had the end of the game not ended like it had, the talk would have been how good of a game it was, just like the first meeting of the year, and how this is going to be a continued rivalry like it was the first game of the year. That said, we have I'm not going to call it a blown call, because I can't say 100% it was a charge or it was a block.
I don't think it was anything.
Right. This is what
I watched this replay as well about 10 times last night. Slowed it down, paused it, slowed it down, paused it, slowed it down, paused it. Both of them, as he's setting his feet, the Duke player setting his feet, the Syracuse player is leaving his feet. It's almost he was set when they collided, but he was not set when they jumped.
I disagree. He was set when he left. But that said, the player wasn't out of control.
Right.
I believe he was set, but I don't believe the player was out of control.
And he also made, I was getting to this point, he made an attempt to miss the contact. He wasn't trying to hit him. He turned his body sideways, tried to avoid the contact.
All that said, in a perfect world, it's a no call.
Right. Shoulders up, hit him with his chest.
Right. That said, that call did not decide the game.
No, Boeheim decided the game.
Right. I mean, there was 8 seconds left. It was a player control foul, so they would have inbounded the ball, got to foul whoever they wanted to in the perfect world, like I said. And they could have missed the free throws, came down and hit a 3 to win or a 2 to tie. And we saw in the first game, the first meeting, Duke hit a 3 to send it to overtime.
It's overtime. That's correct.
I mean, the game in no way was over. Boeheim decided the game with the way he acted. And I don't know that I've ever seen since Bob Knight.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, hadn't got thrown out in 28 years, I believe, and decided to do it at that point during that game. It's unreal.
Here's the thing: Syracuse they're becoming a power. I mean, they've always been pretty good the past maybe 10 years, but they're starting to be recognized as the power in the ACC. It's just a different world that Boeheim's living in now. Now, I mean, it's obvious what he did was a technical. I mean, he was on the mid-court, out in the court,
Jacket
dropping
off.
F-bombs.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, Jacket didn't never make it all the way off.
No, he tried.
He tried.
He had a little,
get it off.
I don't know what he was doing.
He tried pretty hard, but didn't succeed to get that jacket off.
And Syracuse shot 39% as a team and let Duke shoot 48%. And Boeheim says they lost because of that call. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you let a team shoot 10% better than you did.
Well, he said he felt
field.
like they lost because of that call. Looking back, he has came out and said he shouldn't have reacted that way.
But after the game, after the Maryland-Syracuse game, he was still the same thing.
Still pretty fired up.
All that said, like you said, he came on the DP show this week, Dan Patrick, and he said, in the moment, you sometimes lose it. I really thought, and I wasn't right, that the game was over at that point. Players in my program are not allowed to get a technical foul.
Well, and I agree with that. Technical foul is the coach's job. There are times when you get a technical foul on purpose.
But there is no way you can lose your composure like that and then preach discipline and that you cannot get a technical foul. All right, let's say this. Can you imagine that it wasn't Boeheim that got the technical foul? It was C.J. Fair, as soon as the play was over, reacting the same way that Boeheim did. The story the next day isn't whether that call was a block or charge. The story is C.J. Fair losing his mind.
Right. And that being said, well, if C.J. Fair gets ejected, of course he's going to have to miss the game. That's going to be a lot, I think, more detrimental to the team.
That said, C.J. Fair had a lot more composure, and even asked after the game, he said, did you think that him getting the technical decided the game? And he said, well, we still had a chance up until that point.
Yeah,
So,
I heard that.
And then even Boeheim is really somebody I've had a lot of respect for. He helps Coach K coach the USA team.
I hate his zone. I hate somebody that relentlessly plays his zone. But as a person, he's always seemed like a pretty good guy.
But even after the Syracuse, he said, even after the Duke game, he said, he said the ACC as a whole must have something against him because they played Maryland in 2 nights, and Maryland didn't play that night. So it just wasn't that call. It was the whole ACC going out against him.
You were on that wagon there for a little bit on Facebook. You said that it's rigged.
That was humor. I was predicting what the rest
he was going to say.
Right.
Okay.
And even after the Syracuse Maryland game, it ends on almost an exact same play.
Yeah.
And it's a no call. And then ask after the game, did you think that was a bad call? And he's like, no, that's the right call. There's no way they could have called that after the terrible officiating we had Saturday night against Duke. So, I mean, I just thought that he acted with the least amount of composure that he could have Saturday through Monday.
That being said, at Syracuse, do you think that call gets made the same way?
Here's the thing. Here's what I have to say. After that game, everybody wanted to say that call was made because it was at Duke. I think if that is at any other gym in the country, that the story isn't even the call. Nobody even reacts to the call.
Right.
They just react to Boeheim.
Right.
Because it was at Duke, the call was the issue.
Right. Well, Duke is kind of a notorious place for home field advantage. Home court advantage, I suppose.
Duke takes more charges home or away than any team in the country.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with where they play.
I'm not blaming
It's just
this
the
on
way
Duke.
they play
I'm just saying,
defense.
referees are human, and they do. I can imagine that if I was in Cameron and I had a close, controversial call at the end, that I would be a little swayed.
I would like to think I would, no matter where I was. I'd like to think I'd be a
I'm not
professional
saying
at my
that
job.
in your mind you make the choice that says, I'm at Duke, I'm going to do this. I'm thinking that subconsciously you're there, you see that atmosphere, people's going crazy, and your first thought is, this is Duke. They take a lot of charges. I'm at Duke. He knows what he's doing before you stop and think about it.
All this said,
Because it was an instant call. I
okay.
mean, it was whistle.
All
charge,
this said,
less than a second.
at the end of Game 1, Syracuse and Duke, at Syracuse, in overtime, Rodney Hood goes up for a dunk,
Right.
which would have tied the game, I believe.
Right.
And his hand gets hammered before he ever gets
agree.
to the rim.
I agree.
An obvious foul. And it didn't get called. But that wasn't the story.
No.
The story was that it was a great game.
Right. And I agree that Boeheim made this call more. I mean, I would have probably only watched it one time had Boeheim even got one technical. But I watched it about 15 times.
And had he just ripped the jacket off and yelled, he probably would have just got the one technical. But, walking to half court, that'll get you the other one.
It was more like a hop to half court. It wasn't even a walk. It was a tantrum. It was full-fledged tantrum.
It was bad.
Pretty bad.
I mean, that's... Do you think it will be awkward when Boeheim and Coach K get together for the USA team again? Do you think?
Nah. I think they understand. Heat of the moment. He got fired up. He normally doesn't lose. It's cool. He's kept it bottled up for 40 years.
You know how much I respect Coach K, and I was even kind of disappointed in him after the game because after the game he came out in his press conference and said, something along the lines of, I'm proud of Boeheim for how he reacted, showing enthusiasm for his team, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's his boy.
Yeah, it is, but that doesn't mean that you have to lie. Because in his heart of heart, he didn't think that was the right thing to do.
Well, he could have no commented, I guess. That's probably what I'd have done.
And, I mean, he's his boss when it comes to the
Right.
USA team anyways. So, that's it. But we still got a lot of college basketball talk left. We'll carry that over into the next segment of the show. We'll talk about UK getting swept by Arkansas this year. We'll go what to watch with WKU. Daniel has a little bubble watch for us, who's in, who's out, what they need to do to get in. We'll talk about the games today, a lot of interesting games, LSU, Florida, Syracuse at Virginia, who's been a real surprise this year in the ACC, Kansas at Oklahoma State, a team on the rebound, trying to get solid position into the tournament. Be sure to refresh your browser when we come back, so if you're listening to us on Spreaker or on the live feed page.
We'll be back in 5 minutes, right at 9:30. So stick with us and refresh your browsers.